My name is Tony Roberts, as you heard. I have no disclosures. And this is the right lecture for geography. I just thought because some people don't know where South Africa is, I thought I'd just show you. So that's Africa, and I'm right here, and this is the blow-up of that. So I live in the Western Cape, which is very close to the southern tip of Africa, and it's the most beautiful place in the world. So please, you're all welcome to visit us. So like Sean, I have a bit of a personal slant on my talk today, and I'll just want to sketch a little bit about myself as a person with a bleeding disorder. I was diagnosed with Hemophilia A, severe. We always say severe. We want to make it sound so, not mild, not moderate, severe. At age 18 months, a bit about my family. I had a brother who was also diagnosed with Hemophilia A, and he passed away, unfortunately. And then nobody else, except my sister, who is now also a carrier, and she has a son who has Hemophilia A. So I was born in the 1950s. So you can imagine the treatment that we received in South Africa. We had, when I was growing up, we had fresh frozen plasma, for those of you who can remember that. It's actually frozen when it comes to the patient, and the doctor has to put it in some warm water, and then it gets infused with a drip set, and it takes quite a long time. And then the wonderful cryoprecipitate, which was amazing for us. And then hemosulfate came. So since the 1950s, I've had many bleeds and many tears, to the extent that my knees are both, I have a left replacement, and my right knee is, I have an stiffened knee. What do you call it? Nurse, the nursing sister, nursing doctor. Arthrodist. And also my ankles are severely damaged. So as a result of all this, I had quite poor schooling attendance, and my schooling performance wasn't good at all, to the extent that I eventually dropped out of school. And then I think as a result of that, I developed quite poor self-esteem and a lack of confidence. But like many of us, there's sometimes a turning point in one's life. And that happened to me through people, through my family, and through other people who assisted me. What happened was that I eventually completed my schooling so that I could go on to tertiary education, study to be a teacher, and eventually I decided I wanted to be a psychologist. So just my context as a treater is that I'm an educational psychologist. I coordinate the psychosocial outreach for the South African Hemophilia Foundation, which means facilitating camps for various age groups, mostly hemophilia, young men, teenagers, and then also I work with older men who have hemophilia, and I'll come back to that now. Then I also coordinate what is called the Parents Empowering Parents program in South Africa, where I work with parents. And I do counseling with persons with bleeding disorders, mainly the older gentlemen, and then the younger ones at the camps. And as David said, I'm a member of the psychosocial committee, and what I've done recently, I've put all this into some research that I'm doing of lived experiences of persons with hemophilia, which I'm really enjoying. So the advantages for me of being a bleeder treater is, like Gayton said, the words empathize comes up a lot for me. That I think I have an ability to empathize with parents and with persons with bleeding disorders. In my work with younger people at the hemophilia camps, I do disclose to them that I have hemophilia, and that in that way, I think that they are encouraged when they listen to me, when we interact. And I'm hoping that that can motivate them also to come out of their dark periods in their lives. Because I'm hoping that I do act as a role model to these young people. Then working with parents, especially through the Parents Empowering Parents organization, I believe that I do represent to them an example that a person with a bleeding disorder, even severe bleeding disorder, can become self-sufficient and live a normal life. Because those of you who have worked with parents do realize that there's such a vulnerability with some parents, especially with new diagnoses and so on, that they sometimes feel that their child is never going to live a normal life. And I hope that I'm an example of someone who can live a normal life. And then hopefully also an example of hope for their child. But there are challenges of being a person with a bleeding disorder and who also work with other people with bleeding disorders. And the main challenge for me is something that I learned from Edmund Husserl, who is the father of phenomenology, and that came through my research, is Husserl talks about bracketing. And for me, it is the difficulty of bracketing while in a therapeutic space with another person with a bleeding disorder. So in other words, what Husserl was saying about bracketing is to leave aside my own biases, my own prior knowledge of hemophilia. And when I'm in the space with the other person, it is not about my own experiences. It is about the lived experiences of the other person. And I think as a therapist, that has been a wonderful tool for me to practice. But it is definitely a challenge when it is triggered by the experience of the other. And it is not an easy, so it is something that I have to constantly work on. So like the other speakers, I don't believe that being a bleeder, a person with hemophilia, and working with other people is easy. I also don't, and I agree with Sean, that other therapists, other psychologists, they do an equally good job, except I think the challenge for me is that I constantly have to bracket my own experience of being a person with hemophilia. And I have to remind myself constantly of my own philosophy of psychological work, which is that the client is the healer, and my role is to create a space for psychological healing to occur. And this continues to be a struggle for me. So in summary, the advantage of being a psychologist with a bleeding disorder, working with other persons with bleeding disorders, is that he or she has the opportunity to create therapeutic spaces that are steeped in deep understanding and genuine intentionality. But the caution is to know when and when not to bracket. Because there are times when it is not so important to bracket, There are times when I've actually disclosed to somebody that I can empathize with you. And there are times when I have kept that completely bracketed throughout the process.